Hi, I'm Mark Stelter, Director of Community Association Lending here at Itasca Bank and Trust Company. Even after 20 years, I wake up every day with the same goal, to make maintaining properties as stress-free as possible for property managers and board members of any size association. So whether you're a manager, board member, unit owner, vendor, or just someone curious about life inside a community association, join me as I sit down with guests from the field. Welcome to Community Association Insights. Let's get into it. Welcome back to Community Association Insights, a production of Itasca Bank and Trust Company. My name is Mark Stelter. I am the Director of Community Association Lending. I am sitting here with two of the brightest minds that I know in community association law. I have Kerry Bartell from Kovitz, Shifrin, Nesbit, or as the website would be, ksnlaw.com. And David Bloomberg from Chuhak and Tecson. I've known both of you for probably more years than I can remember, so I appreciate you taking time to come on the program and give us some of your insight.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us, Mark.
So the purpose of these podcasts is to build a bit of an education for the unit owner, board member, business partner, give them an idea of what life is like inside condo land, community association living. First broadcast, we had Cheryl from CAI, the executive director. She provided just a wealth of information. I can't stress enough, if I can just take a moment, that if you're a board member, a unit owner, a business partner of any kind inside the Chicagoland Community Association industry, go to CAI-Illinois, all spelled out, .org. Look at the website, look at the benefits, consider joining. The cost is minimal. It is a wealth of information. Kerry has been a past board president, current board member?
Current committee chair.
Committee chair. Mm-hmm. You will find a tremendous amount of resources completely worth the expense. So that's my ad for CAI.
Nicely done.
Yeah. So we're just trying to build a library of resources. And so we did an interview with Cheryl. Second one, we had Carrie Surratt and Simon Fox from Associa. Another great conversation. Kind of looked at the city versus suburban property management perspectives, looked at self-managed property risks, self-managed association risks, and just some of the things that Associa does. We kind of covered Associa Cares, which is just a tremendous arm of Associa that does great work for communities that have been through disasters. And so now we're on to law, and we appreciate
the fun stuff.
Appreciate you being there. So let's do just a quick commercial or just background, if you want to give us a little bit as far as where you've been in your career and kind of how you arrived at KSN.
Sure. So I'm a principal with Kovitz, Shifrin, Nesbit. It's where I started my career, so I've been there. Oh, goodness, I'm going to age myself again. 26 years, I believe. And we represent community associations, have for 40 years. We are in our 40th year. And we kind of do every aspect of community association law. So the corporate side, which is what I do, litigation, collection, tax appeals, sort of everything that comes up with respect to associations. And, I still love what I do. I think it's really, David and I were just talking about it, sort of a unique position to be in, to be able to help people in a leadership role which they never trained for. So certainly doing something like this, a podcast, and just providing information to people that have no idea often what they're getting themselves into. So, it's kind of fun. It's the fun side of what we do.
Yeah, you and I have been through many board meetings.
Yes.
And unit owner meetings, and tensions can run high.
Yeah.
Especially when there's money at stake where special assessments or large projects might be, coming on board. So it's good to have somebody with the ability to calm the nerves, provide a rational explanation, and give a legal perspective.
Yeah,
from
absolutely.
That. So, great.
Absolutely.
Mr. Bloomberg?
Yes, thanks. I am the head of the Condo, Condominium and Common Interest Community Association group at Chuhak and Tecson. I'm also head of the litigation group at that firm. Chuhak and Tecson, a 65 lawyer firm located in Chicago, and it's a full service firm. So being at Chuhak's been great because you've been able to handle the condominium side alongside a lot of other kinds of expertise, and that has been great. My career has been more recently focused on condo. I started my career as a corporate lawyer in New York City, represented big companies, and I was honored to join my father 13 years ago at Chuhak and Tecson. My father, Steve Bloomberg, founded CAI Illinois in the mid-'70s, and being able to carry on his legacy and continue to solve problems for condominiums has been the greatest joy of my professional career. And I find myself, despite my background of working with the big corporations, supposedly what they call big law, I find that now being able to work with boards and real people dealing with real situations and real immediate problems and being able to provide insight to solve them on an immediate basis is incredibly gratifying to me. I think that all of three of us at this table agree that the kind of problems that condominium associations have, it gets very personal, it gets very real, and it takes a very specific skill set. I think Kerry and I would agree upon that, to manage those problems.
Yep.
Law school doesn't train you for this. It's about getting reps. It's about understanding people. It's about understanding what's inside of them that leads them to have the problems and using the skill and reps that we have to solve them. And I look forward to talking about that today.
Yeah, it almost seems like you can't just have a law degree, or you can't just have a managing license, or you can't just know about loan terms and the way to structure different common element repair loans. You got to have a little bit of a psychology degree
Yes.
and counselor and
I'm
best
a
friend.
I'm a therapist
type.
now. I say very little. Like Kerry and I know the law.
Yeah.
Like we can recite the Condo Act and do the dictionary thing where we cite the specific section to sound smart as lawyers.
Exactly.
But every day, I can guarantee you that we are trying to tailor problems based on the personalities involved, thinking ahead about how the problem might be solved. And it's that personal skill that I think we look for in other attorneys to train. It's not necessarily somebody that can write the best brief, although that's still important. It's somebody that can look at somebody, know how it best be solved, and know the boards. And I think something we could talk about today is that every board we represent, the hundreds of different boards that we come in contact with, everyone is different.
Yep.
And that's informed by the culture of that board, things that happened before we got there. And those are things that, in addition to looking at declarations and bylaws, I want to know what's going on with the people, what they're worried about, what's going on the property. That oftentimes is at least as important as what's in their documents.
Yeah, and I think in working with boards and unit owners, the biggest skill that's missing in today's community association, whether it's here or around the country, is the ability to listen to somebody.
Yes.
I think somebody wants to be heard. I think they want somebody to listen. They don't want them to just hear what they say. Everybody has a perspective. Everybody has a point of view. And I think there's too much talking past each other and maybe not enough listening.
Yeah, there's often times where I walk into a conflict between the board and an owner, and when I get involved, it's at level 7 or level 8, right? They both sides are just completely entrenched, and the board is at the position where they're like, well, the owner's just unreasonable, and this is ridiculous. We can't do what they want to do, and I find myself a lot of times saying, hey, everybody, take a second. What is the owner really mad about? It's not about what they're yelling about now. It's because somebody didn't cut their shrubs the way they wanted them cut, 2 months ago. And they've just piled on at this point because everybody's mad at everybody. So let's back up. Somebody who has an inroad to talking to the owner on a normal level,
right,
at a normal, sort of pace to find out what they're really upset about. And can we get rid of that underlying problem? And then I bet the rest of this starts to dissipate a little bit. Yeah. And so, as David said, I think that, when we are helping our clients and helping associations from the board's perspective, it is much more about conflict resolution and helping the board achieve their goals, whatever that is, and carrying out their fiduciary duty, while managing the fact that they're a neighborhood and they're a community. They're running in many cases, a multi-million-dollar corporation, right? So there's this sort of corporate, oh my gosh, we got to do everything.
Meaning the cash flow that's generated every year through the
property
assessments.
value. Yeah, exactly. But they're neighbors. They have to go walk down the street and walk their dog and run into, Bob and Joe and Sue. So I think that puts owners who decide to become board members in a very unique position. They have to balance those two often competing sort of
those forces.
Forces, that's a good word. So, a lot of it is when we talk about training board members or, how can they prepare, I always tell my boards, particularly new board members, you need to understand what your governing documents say. You need to understand the law. That's why we're here. To help you guide you through that. But as David said, you also need to understand what is it that your owners are concerned about, and what are their goals, because those two things need to come together at some point.
And that's a good place to start. The governing documents and how that applies to condominiums, townhomes, cooperatives, even single-family associations. So the ranking order, I guess let's go from bottom up, might be bylaws, declaration, state statutes, and court cases? Is that how that works?
Well, I mean, look, everything is governed by a set of laws, and the way they intersect, gets interesting. Every association, in order to be a condominium or common interest community association, has a declaration that needs to be filed that establishes
recorded at the county level,
state level,
and
the county level. You got to be registered as a corporation with the state,
right,
and the documents are recorded at the county level. And those documents establish you as a corporate entity, and they contain most of the time what are boilerplate provisions about everything ranging from insurance coverage to issues relating to covenants about how to use and not to use the property, collecting assessments and things like that. Bylaws more relate to corporate organization, composition of boards, how to conduct meetings, and then there's what we call the rules. Rules are a set of documents which I like to describe to associations as the bylaws establish the generals. The rules relate to how are you actually operating this property on a day-to-day basis. And as properties and the use of property evolves, it's always a good idea to have each board kind of look at how is this property operating now, and is there a good set of rules that would make the running of the property easier or more balanced or more realistic given how the management is and everything else.
So that's the not running a business out of your home, how many pets you're allowed to maintain.
When to put the garbage out.
I always, it's the how to be nice to your neighbor.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Don't throw a party at 2 o'clock in the morning.
And more importantly these days, especially with what we do, is when somebody violates it, there needs to be a set and predictable procedure, especially given
And
the state of the
consistent.
law.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
How to enforce those,
Yeah.
and how to make sure it's done consistently. What management companies and boards don't quite understand now is that every action they take as far as violations has some precedential value towards the association, the way they enforce it, the way they conduct any hearing with respect to violations, and the way they issue fines. There is a measure of discretions that board have, but given the state of the law, and also given how these boards are being viewed by the different unit owners within the association, having a measure of consistency and predictability and transparency with respect to those things is the difference between boards being respected and boards being hated.
It's true.
And it just seems like for a long period of time, I mean, going back to when you and I first met, and you had mentioned your dad, Steve, as far as one of the founding members. And I think the Condo Act was written in the 60s in Illinois originally, and then kind of evolved over time. But for a long period of time, it was just a sleepy little industry. When you think back to the people that were part of that founding, I think of, Andreas Organi, your dad, some of the early other attorneys that were involved in our industry. It was Linda Schiff.
Right,
And
Linda.
Linda,
Gosh. Yep.
my entire career really is possible because Linda was the one that kind of cleared the brush in the forest for us all. And, she kind of, was the opening for all the bankers to come in and go, the water is only 6 inches. It's not 16 feet. I'm not going to drown in this. I'm going to be safe. And, and I actually reached out to her and thanked her for that and said I was going to, at some point in the podcast, kind of mention her. So I got her permission first. But she did. We all owe a debt of gratitude on the banking side. But the attorneys.
She was one of the first people I met.
I'm sure. Yeah,
totally.
Yeah. And I've heard
so
some,
funny.
some great stories because it's, nobody else, would lend money back then.
Yep.
But the management companies that were there in the beginning, the lawyers that were there, the contractors that kind of figured out that, this is kind of a great niche to be in. But for years, it was this sleepy little cottage industry.
Well, what happened, really, to be honest, if you look at the evolution of the Condo Act and the evolution of condominiums in general, it was coming out of a structure that existed pre-war, which was co-ops.
Right.
And the co-op structure was
Which
really
is big in New York, right?
Yes.
really big in Manhattan, where I used to
Right.
live. And the difference between the co-ops and the condos on a wide basis, and you see this written into some of the older declarations, is co-ops you get to choose your neighbors.
Right. Right.
And it's been an evolution. You see it through the 70s and the 80s. You still have a lot of declarations in the city especially that allow for rights of first refusal,
Right.
which carries on this concept of like if something really undesirable happens or if somebody's coming in that we don't want,
Right.
that might take our property values down, we get to maybe buy them out.
And a lot of times, the stories I've read in New York is they don't want the celebrities. They don't want the paparazzi
absolutely.
sitting outside their building waiting for them to walk in. So, you might be a famous person, whether in business or Hollywood, but we don't want you because there's going to be 1,000 reporters waiting out there.
Too much attention.
Too much
No,
attention.
and that's oftentimes, even today, that's the tension that we have to face, which is that we don't like this neighbor, we don't like what they're doing. What are our rights to try to make this community more harmonious? Because
So that's
every
completely
community has
different on the condo and townhome side than it is on the co-op side.
Oh, yeah.
completely different.
Totally
Co-op,
different.
I find with the co-ops I represent, they have almost unlimited power to do what they want, these boards, because it's a private situation.
Right.
It's governed, to the extent any Illinois laws apply. It's the Business Corporation Act and not the Not-for-Profit Corporation Act.
And we covered this before with, I think when Cheryl was here and maybe even when Kerry and Simon were here, but in a community association, if it's a single family or a condominium or a townhome, those are governed where the unit owner has a legal description, a PIN number, a mortgage perhaps that's filed on their property, and in a cooperative situation, the corporation owns the building, and what we would consider unit owners in a condominium are shareholders, and they have proprietary leases that they sign, and so that just sets up a different situation
structure.
altogether. Yeah. So I'm a new owner in a building. The other owners have smelled, fresh blood in the water, and they come to me and say, "You'd be a perfect person for the board." And all of a sudden, now I'm on the board, and then the board has elected me to an office, whether it's president or treasurer. We've kind of covered know your governing documents. That'd be the first thing. One of the calls that I get on a pretty regular basis is the control of the money. And you had alluded to the fact that you're sometimes in charge of a corporation that has cash flow that can be tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or $1 million or more in cash flow, plus the value of the real estate. So when I look at control of funds, what I specifically hear is I want to change my managing agent. What do we need to do in order to take care of that? And of course, I always say call your attorney. But the the checking account and the reserve funds can be significant amounts of the assets that are under control of the board, and in many cases, they either are unaware of maybe the bank that they're using through a lockbox, a collection arrangement for the assessments, and secondly, they might not be signers on that account. So I guess I'll put it to you as the
Yeah.
legal minds. Is that a best practice to not be on a signer on the account? Because it seems like you lose control to a certain degree of wanting to make a change.
Yeah. So there's kind of, I see two levels to that issue. The first is, even if you're professionally managed, right, which the vast majority of associations are, even if you're professionally managed, they are still just the board's agent, right? So if they're preparing your financials, they're handling all of your, income expenses, they're doing all of that legwork, it's still the duty of the treasurer and then the board to review those documents, to be aware of those documents, to know where their bank accounts are, what do the numbers look like, and really oversee what's going on with the financials, again, even though somebody else is doing the legwork. With regard to bank accounts, I see this often as well, and it drives me bananas. This is the association, these are the association's funds. As a board member, you are fiduciary, you have a fiduciary duty to the association. Certainly a large part of that fiduciary duty is a duty of care and oversight to manage the association's finances.
So give me real quick, give me just a thumbnail sketch. What's the definition of a fiduciary?
Fiduciary duty just means that the person owes a duty to the community. They have to put the best interests of the community above their own individual interests.
Okay.
So it is a very high standard of care. And so if the board members or some of the board members are not signatories on their own bank accounts, I don't know how you're managing those funds. You need to have access. I think the best way to set it up, in my opinion, although management companies may handle this a little bit differently, and you can have that discussion, but typically what I prefer is that on the checking account where it's operating, you're paying your bills, the manager needs to be a signatory on that account, right? They're not going to want to go to hunt down a board member to sign. But the board treasurer and or the president should also be signatories on that account.
And have an idea of the activity that's going through the account.
Right. And you have access to the bank account records. You can get ledger, whatever you need. For the reserve account, typically that only has signatories for the board. Reserve accounts, if you're new to the board, reserve account is essentially your savings account, right? It is for large capital expenditures, unforeseen expenses. So those are going to be, the reason why you use those funds is going to be on a particular basis, right? It's not operating. It's not ongoing.
We look at it from our side as large common element repairs.
Yeah.
And so in your declaration, whether it's a townhome or a condominium, you're going to have your declaration that is your governing document. And contained in that declaration, there's going to be a listing of your common elements that the board is responsible for repairing or replacing. There's common elements, and then there's limited common elements, which we can cover if we have time, but just to kind of clarify that a little bit.
Right. And so the reserves, I think that most management companies are not signatories on those accounts. I don't think they need to be either. Right. That should require a little bit more board action, right? Board involvement, and it should require signatories of the board members themselves. But, I often equate it to, you have your own bank account. Would you imagine that some third party is going to be a signatory on your own bank account without you also being a signatory on it?
Right.
These are your funds, right?
You're right. And I think about the converse of what you're saying. It's absolutely correct that, when you talk about a fiduciary, that's what you do, Mark.
Right.
Bankers are fiduciaries. And if you get somebody off the street, and the example you give, want to join the board, they don't understand that that's a level of responsibility they have, and it needs to be explained to them. Mm-hmm. But the point that I want to make is that what about these management companies? How many relationships with management companies have I seen fall apart because of perceived lack of, I don't have control over the funds, so the assumption and the fear becomes from somebody that doesn't know. Well, if I don't have control, you must be doing something nefarious with the funds. I don't have control of it. What are you doing? Yeah. And just that dynamic creates a sense of distrust. Now, I think if you talk to the management companies about this, they're going to say, well, this is just the easiest way to do it. We have our technology here. Yep. We have our systems. We pay the bills. We need to pay routine bills. We need to hit the buttons. The board members aren't as responsive as we need. We need to have this.
Right.
But from a relationship standpoint, which is you're working for the board, as Kerry mentioned, they work for the board. They are the agents of the board. They should provide as much oversight and transparency to these board members in their finances as possible. That's how you create trust.
Yeah, and I think because there are so many quality management firms in the Chicagoland area.
There are.
I mean, there's always going to be a few bad apples in any industry, whether it's bankers or whether it's lawyers.
Yes.
Or no, not at all. And I find that the management companies, they want that discussion. I think the biggest frustration for the managers is the board members don't want to be involved. How many times have I talked to a manager and they're like, look, we're pushing the board to take a greater share of involvement in the process, and they just, they have their lives, their careers, their families, whatever it is that's taking up their time. And I'm also a volunteer that I have to meet on Tuesday evening to go over this long list of agenda items. So I think the managers, the top tier managing agents, they want that accountability. They want to have that discussion so that they can tell you these are the checks that we wrote for you last month. This is how much money you have in your reserves. These are the projects that are coming up. And the king of all discussions that creates and allows us to exist is you don't have enough money in reserves and you've got a big project coming up.
Correct.
So let's call a bank.
And we've got projects coming down the pike, right?
Big ones.
Big ones. And so, the understanding the financials and the financial status of the association is critical. You're charged with operating the association, and that includes long-range projects and long-range budgeting. And I just don't, I don't know how a board can do that effectively if they don't look at and understand and digest the financials.
So I want to understand my governing documents. I want to understand my financial position and who's in control of my funds. Mm-hmm. Can we take 5 minutes for 22.1 and just talk about the importance of that? And really from a self-managed association, because one of the things we want to do is, we recognize that there are self-managed associations, both small and medium and large in size. Some have on-site independently licensed managers. Some just have boards that kind of oversee. But 22.1 just seems like it's a stumbling block that can create some expense and legal headaches if it's not followed correctly. So
not just can, it does.
Yes.
And so can
especially, well, let's talk about the worst case scenario.
Maybe define it first. What
let's
is
start
22.1
with, well,
cover?
22.1 is a section of the Condominium Act that, without getting into the real details, involves a disclosure that must be made to the proposed buyer of a condominium unit, certain discrete and defined information about that condominium association relating to its financial condition and relating to its physical condition. And every buyer is entitled to an updated snapshot as of the time they're asking. So the example you gave with, a small self-managed building, there's 3 flats in Chicago, tons of them.
Yep.
Condominiums. And you're on the hook if that disclosure's off. I have in my office right now more 22.1 litigations than I ever have.
Yeah.
They're out there because that's a big decision people make. And the amount of money that they could be on the hook to pay, especially if there's a big capital improvement project, is substantial and does materially affect the buying decisions of somebody in a condominium unit.
I actually printed it out before we came here.
Yeah.
And
Oh, here we go.
It's 3.5 pages
It's a lot.
of verbiage that is, the board's obligated to disclose. And we get those discussions, and of course, we always say the same thing, call the attorney, because, they'll move in and, I wasn't told that, especially with the special assessment.
Yep.
We get, and again, this goes back to some of the meetings you and I have been at, where it's at some point, and I don't know if it's more art than science, but at some point, the board starts discussing the project. It's a big number. We're going to have to create a special assessment. At what point, if there is a defined line, does the I'm going to sell my unit owner become obligated to that expense?
So it is an art, I think. But, what's interesting is as David said, the disclosures required are discrete and distinct, right? That what often is confused is that the 22.1 language in the Condo Act, there's similar language in SECA, which is the statute that governs HOAs and townhomes. The board is obligated to disclose capital projects or capital expenditures, not special assessments. The language in the statute is capital expenditures, but it's capital expenditures that are going to occur this year, plus that are anticipated for the next 2 years.
Okay.
Right? So what happens is a board gets an engineering study, and it comes back and it says the roof has a useful life left of, a year and a half. And we need to start bidding it out. We need to start getting our ducks in a row, consider a loan if that's how we want to finance it, or special assessment. I take the position that as soon as that project is discussed in an open board meeting, i.e. it's somehow referenced in the minutes, the 22.1 has to match that. But it is okay for the 22.1 to say, we know we're going to have a roof replacement project in the next year and a half. We are currently in our due diligence phase. We do not know the scope of the project, the nature of the project, the timing of the project, or how we're going to fund that project. It's okay to say we don't know. We don't have all those details. Once you start to fill in those gaps, though, you need to update the 22.1 and fill them in. Well, it's going to be a $200,000 project. We're going to use some reserves, and we're going to get a loan for the other half. In order to fund the loan, we're going to do a special assessment in this amount. So you'll start to fill in the information as it comes up. But once it's in the minutes, the 22.1 is going to have to match what's going on.
So at what point is the board going to reach out to the attorney and say, okay, we're in some uncharted waters. Can you guide us on where we need to be? Is it the first discussion they have regarding the projects, or is it when it gets closer to getting an actual dollar amount for what the cost is going to be?
I'm going to interpret your question, Mark, as saying, what should the board do? Because what the board does do, as Kerry would say, is oftentimes not there.
Right.
Good managers and good management companies call me regularly and say, we need to update this or ask questions about it. Because the downside of not doing it is so much greater. It's got to be, and again, I think it's evolved over the past 13 years, culminating in the collapse of the building in Surfside, Florida, in which everybody is really on their cackles about the effects of proper disclosure and letting people know what they're getting themselves into.
Yep.
The point that it should happen is anytime, it should be on a regular basis. There should not be a triggering event that causes you to do it.
Right.
Because one of the things on the, litigation's disclosed. You're always updating the numbers. There's got to be what's the amount of reserve.
Right.
So I would think whenever they're doing it, the manager should take care to just be like, all right.
Yeah. And that's a really good point. The 22.1 is not a static document. Right?
Correct.
So even though you might have approved it last June, now we're in March. There should have been many approvals.
Progress has been
Yes.
made.
You know what? I would
Yeah.
go. I'm going to go a step farther here, and I'm making a suggestion here. Every board has their standard laid out agenda. We're approving the minutes.
Yes.
There should be, after that, status of 22.1. It should be in every meeting.
Right.
Yep.
Because it's that important, and it is a snapshot of that condominium's financial in status and physical status at
Right.
that moment in time for the buyer.
Yeah, in this part of the country, we're in a four-season climate. The common elements age.
Yes.
And really, having to forecast out for the next 2 years, sometimes they're not even getting that information.
Right.
And if you're trying to
At that
draw,
time.
and I guess what I'm saying also is like, this is also, on an intangible basis, the first snapshot that a potential buyer has of your building. This is somebody you want in there, responsible owners, their first view of how this board operates.
Right.
Why would you want to hide the ball?
Right.
You don't want to trick
And-
somebody
and-
into buying. That's not a good look either.
Yeah, and I'm sure in most cases it's not intentional. It's just
Right, it's just
not
sloppy.
something where they're just not. Again, board members are volunteers. Unless they're a property manager, which that happens where property managers end up on the boards
Right.
of their associations.
Right.
The most qualified board member that you could possibly have, I think. But many of them are not, and most are not, and they just aren't prepared for that. So, okay, so I've got my legal documents, I've got my financial situation, I've got my disclosures under 22.1. as an association, as a board member, I'm signing contracts every year with different vendors. Understanding what's in my contracts, probably pretty high on the list.
Yeah. So I often say that if a board is gonna, spend money on attorney's fees, there's two places. One is making sure you understand or get your attorney's opinion on how to conduct your election, how to do your budget, right? The third thing is have them review all of your contracts. Most contractors are drafting their own contracts. I've seen 300, 400, 500,000 dollar contracts that are on one piece of paper, one page. And I go, what?
And possibly written more in favor of the contract.
There are always more,
Not
yes.
possibly.
Not possibly, always.
Than the association.
And they often don't have, what is the contractor doing? All it'll say is replacement of the siding, $300,000. Well, what's going into that? What is making up the $300,000? So, there's, we can't, as attorneys, protect a board from everything. But when you are entering into contracts, we can put in protections that allow the board to pursue their rights. And what I mean by that is, are there indemnification provisions? Are there damage provisions? Are there attorney fee shifting provisions?
Are you getting permits?
Are you getting permits? Is there a scope of work
Yes.
that we can point to when the board comes to us and says, well, they're not doing what they said they were going to do, and I go, okay, show me the contract, and it says siding replacement.
Right.
How do I know?
No one wants to put a scope of work. And you know what? All of this, look, most of the time, not most, I would say a lot of the time it's benign. This is just how they've done business, and this is how business has been allowed to be conducted over the years. But there's also a feeling in the industry that's developed over many years that it's a condo association. These are lay people. Maybe we could take advantage. Maybe we can win on the margins here. And there's a place for us to really be advocates for the associations in this place. You've got to deal with us in good faith. And boards need to do that.
Right.
The risk to boards of these things going wrong, just like the 22 ones, the downside's enormous. And the protection element of what Kerry and I do, it's a quick review.
Right.
Yeah.
We have all the rolled out clauses.
Right.
So that's just best practices.
Yeah, and it's like having a bodyguard. When you're a celebrity walking through a restaurant, you got somebody in front of you that's going to kind of protect you as you walk through. And I had a conversation with a manager recently, and it just stunned me. And we were talking about how a particular common element was being replaced. Doors or windows, something along those lines. And the contractor used the wrong material. Mm-hmm. And the manager, and I said, of course the question I always ask is, did it pass inspection? And they said, well, it was written right into the contract that they weren't going to pull a permit. And I said, they actually wrote it into the contract that we're not going to pull a permit? And they said, it happens all the time. Yeah. And of course the next question is, did the attorney review this? And of course, they would never get by an attorney review.
No. No, and I think that it sort of lends to the second part too, which is your attorney should review it, but the board also needs to review it. The board should be well aware of all of their outstanding contracts, whether it's a $500 a month contract that's not a big deal, or a $500,000 replacement project. But often. I will review a contract and I'll put in my sort of cover letter with my writer or whatever, make sure that the board understands the terms, the amount, the timing, when payments are due. Is the board comfortable with those business terms? I'm not necessarily messing with those, right? You've negotiated a contract. Do you understand what the business terms are? Well, I don't know. We didn't look at that. What are you talking about?
Right.
The board has
But you signed
to.
it.
Yeah, they said this is what I need to do, and I'm doing it.
Well, this is the classic example of fiduciary duty. Your
Yes,
duty of due
yes.
care.
Right.
You have to be minimally informed of what's going on, and part of that minimal obligation is understanding what obligations this association
Yes.
has. Who are we on the hook for?
Right.
Who are we paying? What is their job? Like, it doesn't have to be down to as a board member, I know exactly what our indemnification clause is saying. That's not part of it.
No.
But at least knowing what you're obligated to do, what you've hired people for, and that you are aware of that obligation.
I do that with. Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
I do that with loan documents. I said, well,
Right.
are the terms what you agreed to with the bank? Does it match the loan commitment letter?
yeah.
Well, I don't know. Okay, well, this is important.
Right,
You need to make sure that
They're just like free. They're just like free money. What's the difference?
Right.
And that's a good point, because no matter
Yeah.
what law firm we end up working with on the other side, they do always ask for the commitment letter. So,
Yeah.
they want to make sure that
Everything
is in it.
matches.
Have you had situations where the board or managing agent might not be collecting a lien waiver, and then there's a dispute at the end of the project? Is that something that is more or less
You probably have
Yes.
more insight
Occurring?
on that than I do.
Yes, I've noticed, especially in recent years, the construction industry has gotten, there's material issues, costs have gone up, the need for more there's different contractors coming in because of the needs right now than are familiar with dealing with condominium associations. And there has to be oftentimes an education process with these contractors about the need for lien waivers, and especially when the project exceeds a certain scope of dollar value or complexity.
So give me a definition again, because we want to really make this an educational process. What does the lien waiver do for the board?
The lien waiver is kind of a certification that at a certain point in the project that certain things have been achieved and that they've been paid and that everything has been handled. It's just a formal thing that's built into most standard contracts that needs to be done
So-
on certain points in the project.
So when the contractor's on site at your property, there's two components that are going to take place. One's going to be the material that they're using, and one's going to be the labor that is being used to put the material on, whether it's roofing material or siding, whatever it might be, somebody laying down asphalt or concrete. The lien waiver that you're going to get is going to be a partial lien waiver with every check they're giving to the contractor?
Correct.
And then a final lien waiver when the contract is complete and the work is done?
Right. It's a certification. You've done what I've asked you to do, and I'm paying you for what you say. I mean,
And it should be for both labor and material, right?
Yes. So that's a payment. It doesn't affect the warranties otherwise
Correct.
about the quality of the work that's been done, but it's in the nature of a receipt.
Right,
Yes,
That's been done.
right.
right.
And it's also it's a protection for the association, because the contractor is acknowledging that they can no longer lien you for that amount, place a lien against.
Which
your
is really the
property.
biggest protection that the board's going to have.
Right. They can't. They're acknowledging that you paid that amount.
Right.
So it serves both sides in that sense. But yeah, I mean, I also, not all that often. I don't know if you've seen this, but I've a couple of times over the last year or so seen where contractors play with the language on the lien waiver. So it's, well, we we got it, but
Gives
we're
them a little wiggle room,
withholding. Yeah, there's all these sort of exclusions and
So
disclaimers.
again, another opportunity,
Yeah.
spend the money, because you'd rather pay your attorney the money to review the
lien.
document, the lien
Yeah.
waiver, than to be in court when the judge asked for the lien waivers and it was written in such a way that's not beneficial to the
Correct.
to the association.
There's another point of that, and this goes to boards properly delegating the function of expertise, attorneys, bankers, accountants, insurance people
Right.
that have expertise. I'm finding more and more that there's a real benefit, especially with complex projects, for management companies, especially the large ones, to have on staff construction people,
Right.
oversight people.
Right.
Because I know a lot about construction because of contracts, but I'm not a general contractor.
Right.
Right.
But
Same.
the management companies that have somebody that's kind of a check on the contractors, that kind of know their stuff, that have seen the projects, there's tremendous value there. And I think that we're going to see more and more management companies do that as the scope of these construction projects increase. Because there's just too many opportunities. These are big buildings.
Right.
These are real issues. You need to have somebody that kind of knows their stuff to advocate for the owner.
I don't know if you've seen it on LinkedIn, but one of the contractors has Wall of Shame Friday. Have you seen that?
No.
And so it's one of the roofing contractors, and it's just it's sad and entertaining at the same time, which
Right.
I think is genius marketing.
Totally.
So they get brought in to make the repair, and so they take a picture of what they're being brought into, and they just kind of educate the board and the unit owners on this is who you don't want to hire.
Right.
He does it without having to out the prior contractor, but it's like this is why. And I think the other part that's not really legal per se, but it's worth noting is when the work's getting done, having it reviewed, having an inspector that's a third party, not interested,
Yes.
doesn't have any part of the contractor's revenue stream, coming in and saying, yes, this was done
Yeah.
correctly.
No, and I think that's a really good point. You know, if you're doing a large capital project, it is worth the extra money to have an engineer or an architect or consultant that's reviewing the work and doing those progress inspections. You know, if you're doing even a $500,000 project, an extra $20,000 is
Right.
not going to kill anybody.
So that you don't have to spend the $500,000
Correct.
again.
And we have, you know, as attorneys, we then have documentation, right? So it is, I think it's worth the money. I think it's a prudent sort of expense to engage an engineer or consultant because, you know, board members are typically not all of those things. So it's good to have outside experts, always, yeah.
I don't want to lose the time to go over electronic voting, because I think that was one of the things we kind of talked about beforehand, and that seems to be more prevalent today and is probably taking a bigger share of the voting process than it has in the past. Do you want to maybe go over?
Yeah, I mean, I think
electronic
that it really, like a handful of associations were doing it, and then with the pandemic, I know in my office, it was like request after request to do electronic voting. I think it's a really great option in terms of I've seen associations that typically had a very difficult time meeting quorum for their elections now are not having a problem. It invites participation. But, you know, a couple things about electronic voting. One, if you're in a condo association, the rules have to be adopted at least 120 days prior to when you want to use it, prior to the election or amendment or whatever you're going to use it for. The other side of it is once the board adopts the rules, it's a relatively easy process to adopt the rules, owners have to opt in. Just because you got their email address for Bolos or whatever, you know, 5 years ago, you have to get a piece of
So it's
paper.
a positive
Yes,
confirmation.
you have to positively
an
confirm.
acknowledgement.
And it is because they're voting, you know, and often on email.
Right.
So you have to know as the board what email address is my electronic signature? Is it my work address or is it my home address? But I think once you put those in place, it's fantastic. And there's several companies now that literally will run the election for you. You click the button and it's fantastic.
I took the time at the recent CAI Expo in Rosemont. Plug for CAI. It was a great conference this year.
It was.
I had a great time.
I think one of
very
the
good.
best ones we've ever had.
Agreed.
I really I had a great time. But I took the time to talk to some of these newer companies that have gone, you know, national, international. There was one from Canada that was there. The software is great now. The software is very easy to use now. And I think about the investment.
And stands up in court.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely it does. I mean, they're ready to do that. I asked them those questions, and it's verifiable, and you can check on it, and the data goes down to the second of when somebody clicked the link to do it. Like,
Okay.
It's verifiable. And you know what? I'm going to go with the downside again. Given all the problems we've had over the years, all the sleepless nights I've had, all the hair I've lost, based on elections that have gone wrong with proxies and people collecting proxies and causing the nastiness, and the boards coming in based on these nasty elections and the mandates, electronic voting is a better way to go.
Yeah.
I'm recommending it for my associations because it's a more civilized way to conduct these elections.
Good.
And it increases the participation, as Kerry said. The truth is, to be honest, more often than not, Kerry and I are working with the problem associations that have the problems. Most associations, people don't care.
Yeah.
And this is a way to get people involved.
I've got 10 minutes and an endless list of topics, but I want to give you guys a chance. If there's something we haven't covered that you want to take a few minutes and cover, if not, I'll keep going on my list. But if there's something,
Oh, make me
I'll
go
go
first.
I'm not going to make anybody do anything, Kerry.
Is there anything that you're seeing more of in your meetings, in your office, in disputes that you haven't maybe seen in the past?
No, good question.
I'll answer. I'm not going to force you to answer.
Thank you.
Post-pandemic, the talk amongst the industry is the lack of civility between people, and their lack of ability to really communicate in an effective way. A lot of this, as I like to say, and Kerry will agree, is board training is essential. Let people know what it is to be a board member. Get people on the same page about how to best utilize their talents to run an efficient and effective boards. There's a lot of value in doing that. And when I tell people now that the platonic ideal of board membership and board function is when you don't agree with a board decision, right? It happens, like boards are split, that not only do you go along with it, you go out in the community, you advocate for it even though you didn't agree with it. That's the point. And most board members, that doesn't even, what?
Yeah.
You have to get to a point where everybody is acting in good faith for the best of the community. Mm-hmm. We have to get back to a mindset of what we do where people are looking out for the greater good of these associations. Not, and that goes to what we were talking about earlier, not just short-term thinking, not just what's going to get us through the next year and saving money. We have to look out for the best long-term of this association. And, the challenging part is getting people that really believe in the long-term viability of these communities. Too much of the time we're drawing board members that have their own personal agendas and their access to ground when they're on the boards, and people should be really cultivating and recruiting board members that are out for the good long-term values of the community.
Yeah, that's well said, and I feel for the managers that have to play, both psychologist, marriage counselor, and managing agent when they're at these boards, and you and I have been through some real, knockdown doozies.
Yes.
And one of the things that I admire so much about you, Kerry, is you bring a calming presence to the meeting, and people respect you, they know you, and that helps, because I've seen situations where whether it's the attorney, the managing agent, or the board member, and it really has become personal.
Yeah.
And
it always does.
Yes,
it just
agreed.
it goes off the rails.
It goes off the rails, and I think I referenced this before. There are often civility. I agree is just it's deteriorated, and I think it's this idea of piling on, right? And so, when I'm at a board meeting and I try to tell my boards, to your earlier point, really listen to what they're saying. Even if it's the one guy who makes you more angry and you think is more extreme and ridiculous than anybody else out there, listen to what he's saying, because there may be some nuggets in there that you can latch on to pull him back into the flow.
And they're looking for the cues
Correct.
that you listened. You didn't just hear what they said. You listened. You acknowledged.
Correct. Even something simple as, I understand what you're saying. I understand this is your concern. Repeat it back to them.
Right.
I understand this is your concern. This is why we can't do what you want us to do. Right? And then explain it to them. Use your attorney. Use your manager. Use your accountant. Use your, banker. Use whatever.
Credible third-party sources.
Out. And I say all the time, I'm like, look, the board could say the same thing that I say in a meeting. But if I say it, everybody in the audience goes, oh,
yeah.
The attorney said it.
Yeah.
It is having that sense of outside,
Yep.
right? I don't have any stake in the association. And it's a sense of authority. So, I have a huge meeting next week where they're doing, again, this $5 million project. I'm going to be there. The roofer's going to be there. The accountant is going to be there to help them with the finances. Let us take the brunt, right? And so, I think that owners, particularly in the pandemic, they're just less tolerant, and so it's become really difficult for boards to just actually do the business of the association. And so, to David's point, it's finding and recruiting owners that either can stay out of the drama or can manage the drama and really are just focused on how do we promote our association and maintain our association. That is going to filter down to the ownership, right? If the board is not engaged and embroiled in drama, then the owners won't. They don't have anything to latch on to.
They're going to sense that calming attitude and presence.
Yeah.
You two are a wealth of knowledge, and I don't think I even scratched the surface. So I want to say thank you.
We could talk probably for 10 hours, but yeah.
We'll
Everybody would be
We'll have to
bored.
do a second.
More condo content, the better. Let's go.
So how do people find you? Give me.
Yeah. So Kerry Bartell, it's Bartell, and my direct line is 847-777-7246. And my email is kbartell, again with 2 L's, at ksnlaw.com.
Okay.
Yes, I'm at Chuhak and Tecson. My phone number is 312-855-4621. My email is D as in David Bloomberg, BLOOMBERG, at chuhak.com. It's a horrible name, CHUHAK.com.
There you go. Well, it works. Thank you very much. And I just want to give a shout out to the people you can't see here at Love Local. If you're a small to mid-sized business and you're looking to expand your presence online, you want to do something in this kind of a format, this has been such a tremendous resource for us. Look on the link, look at the information on this podcast. You'll find Love Local on there. Give them a call, and try and expand your marketing efforts. It's a great way to do it. It's a great way to educate your customers, your prospective customers, and in this case, unit owners, board members. And I just want to thank you for your time.
Well, thank you, Mark.
Thanks,
for
Mark.
having us.
Take care, everybody.